The needle slipped through silk like a whisper, pulling golden thread behind it in perfect measured strokes. I watched the pattern emerge beneath my fingertips, a delicate vine of forget-me-nots winding along the edge of what would become a christening gown. Each stitch was a small prayer, a tiny piece of beauty I could offer to a world that often felt too harsh, too unforgiving. My workshop was modest, tucked into the back room of our crumbling villa on the outskirts of Taormina. The afternoon sun filtered through lace curtains I'd made myself years ago, casting intricate shadows across my work table. Spools of thread lined the shelves in rainbow order, beside bolts of fabric I'd saved for months to afford. This space was mine, the only thing in my life that truly belonged to me. Until 3 days ago, when everything changed. Valentina. My father's voice cracked through the peaceful silence like breaking glass. I didn't look up from my embroidery, didn't acknowledge the shuffle of his feet in the doorway. Valentina, we need to talk. The needle paused mid-stitch. Something in his tone made my chest tighten, made the air in my small sanctuary feel suddenly thin. I knew that voice, the one he used when the creditors came, when the gambling debts piled higher than he could climb. Papa, not now. I have to finish this piece for Signora Russo's granddaughter by Friday. It doesn't matter anymore. His words fell heavy, final. None of it matters. I finally raised my eyes to meet his. Romano Benedetti looked 20 years older than his 53 years. Gray stubble shadowed his jaw, his shirt was wrinkled, and his hands, once steady hands of a carpenter, trembled like autumn leaves. But it was his eyes that frightened me most. They held something I'd never seen before. Absolute defeat. What have you done? The question emerged barely above a whisper. He stumbled into my workshop, collapsing into the old wooden chair where I sometimes sat to rest my back between orders. His face crumpled, and I watched my father, the man who had raised me alone after Mama died, who had taught me to find beauty in small things, who had once been proud and strong, dissolve into tears. I'm sorry. Dio mio. Valentina. I'm so sorry. The needle fell from my fingers, the christening gown forgotten. I rose on unsteady legs, crossing the small space to kneel before him. Papa, what happened? Is it the Corsicans again? How much do you owe? More than money can repay. His voice broke completely. I went too deep this time. The Corsicans sold my debt to someone else, someone more dangerous, someone who doesn't accept payment plans or excuses. Ice water flooded my veins. There was only one organization in Sicily more feared than the Corsican loan sharks, the Marchetti family. Everyone knew their name, whispered it like a curse or a prayer depending on which side of their favor you stood. The Marchettis. Not a question, a damnation. Papa nodded, his shoulders shaking. Their head, Lucian Marchetti himself, came to collect yesterday. I offered him everything, the villa, my tools, my life if he wanted it. But he said none of that would settle the debt. My hands found his trembling ones, holding tight even as my own fear mounted. Then what does he want? The silence that followed lasted an eternity. Through the window, I could hear the distant sounds of village life, children playing, vendors calling, church bells marking the hour. Normal sounds from a normal world I was about to leave behind. You? The word emerged barely audible. He wants you, Valentina, as his wife. The workshop spun. I released Papa's hands, stumbling backward until my hips struck the work table. The christening gown slipped to the floor, golden thread spilling across old wooden planks like shed tears. No. The denial came automatically, absurdly. That's impossible. I've never even met him. Why would he? I don't know. Papa's voice gained strength through desperation. I don't know why he specifically asked for you. But he was clear. Either you marry him, or he takes everything and still expects payment in blood. My blood, probably. Maybe yours too, eventually. I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to slow my racing heart. Lucian Marchetti. Even his name carried weight in Sicily. They said he'd taken control of the family at 25 after his uncle's murder, that he'd consolidated power through ruthless intelligence rather than brute force, that he was as cold and calculating as the winter wind that swept down from Etna. They also said he'd never shown interest in marriage, preferring to keep his private life as impenetrable as his business dealings. So why now? Why me? There has to be another way. I heard the pleading in my own voice, hated it. I could work, take more orders. We could sell the villa, move somewhere smaller. He gave us 3 days. Papa's interruption was gentle but firm. Tomorrow is the 3rd day. Tomorrow evening, either you're his wife or he comes to collect what he's owed in other ways. The sun had shifted while we talked, the lace curtains now casting different shadows across my workshop. I looked around at the space I'd built stitch by stitch, the embroidery hoops in various sizes, the half-finished projects waiting for my attention, the box where I kept my favorite piece, a small handkerchief I'd embroidered 2 years ago with a pattern of olive branches and doves. I'd made it for a donation to the local orphanage, had poured extra care into every detail, hoping it might bring some small comfort to a child who needed it. That handkerchief was long gone now, delivered to the orphanage with dozens of other pieces I'd donated over the years. Small acts of beauty offered to ease small amounts of suffering. It seemed so naive now, so childishly optimistic to think embroidery could matter in a world where fathers gambled away their daughters' futures, and men like Lucian Marchetti collected human beings as debt payment. "Does he know?" I asked quietly. "Does he know I embroider? That I have a business, small as it is?" Papa's expression crumbled further. I told him everything, hoping it would make a difference. That you're talented, that you provide for yourself, that you deserve better than this. He listened to it all, and then said the wedding would be tomorrow at sunset. 23 years old, and my life had just been sold to a stranger. A dangerous stranger who commanded fear across the island, whose word could end lives or save them, who apparently wanted a wife desperately enough to claim me as payment for debt. The thought made me shudder. What kind of man took an unwilling bride? What kind of marriage could possibly exist under such circumstances? "I won't fight it." The words tasted bitter, but they were true. I looked at my father, seeing the guilt crushing him, and knew I couldn't add to his suffering by refusing. "I'll marry him, Papa. But I want you to leave Sicily afterward. Go to Uncle Marco in Rome. Start fresh somewhere Lucian Marchetti's shadow doesn't reach." "Valentina, no. Promise me." I gripped his hands again, squeezing hard. "Promise me you'll leave, that you'll get help for the gambling, that you'll build something better with whatever years you have left. Let that be my wedding gift from you." He pulled me into his arms, and we stayed that way as the sun continued its descent, as the village sounds gradually quieted, as my old life slipped away like thread through silk. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my bedroom window watching the lights of Taormina twinkle in the distance, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Would Lucian Marchetti be cruel? Indifferent? Would he expect me to play the role of dutiful wife? Or was I simply a possession to be acquired and ignored? The questions circled endlessly, unanswerable. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I spent the dark hours before dawn creating one last piece, a square of fine linen embroidered with a pattern I'd been saving for something special. Roses intertwined with thorns, beautiful and dangerous, hope wrapped around resignation. I worked by candlelight, my fingers moving with practiced precision, even as my heart hammered with fear and grief. When morning came, I packed a small trunk with my most essential tools and materials. If I was being forced into this marriage, I would at least bring the one thing that made me feel like myself. Papa watched from the doorway, his face haggard from his own sleepless night. "I should have protected you better," he said. "Your mother would never forgive me." "Mama would understand." I forced a smile I didn't feel. "She always said we do what we must to survive. This is survival, Papa. Nothing more, nothing less." The day crawled past with agonizing slowness. A priest arrived at noon, sent by Lucian Marchetti to prepare for the evening ceremony. He was an old man, with kind eyes, who seemed uncomfortable with the entire arrangement, but who asked no questions. The church, it seemed, also bent to Marchetti's will. At 4 o'clock, a car arrived, sleek, black, expensive. A man emerged who introduced himself as Constantine, Lucian Marchetti's closest associate. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a scar along his jaw and eyes that missed nothing. "Signora Benedetti will need appropriate attire for the ceremony," he said to my father, his voice surprisingly soft for someone who looked so dangerous. "Mr. Marchetti has provided options." He gestured to the car, where another man waited with 3 garment bags. My throat tightened. Not only had Lucian Marchetti purchased a bride, but he'd also selected her wedding dress without her input. The presumption should have angered me, but I felt only a strange numbness as the dresses were brought inside. They were beautiful, all 3 of them. Simple, but exquisitely made, clearly expensive. The one I finally chose was ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, modest enough to wear before God, elegant enough to suit a Marchetti bride. When I slipped it on, it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Lucian Marchetti struck me as a man who left nothing to chance. As sunset approached, Constantine returned to escort me to the ceremony. My father helped me into the car, his hands shaking as he squeezed mine one final time. "Be strong, Farfallina," he whispered, using his childhood nickname for me, Little Butterfly. "You've always been stronger than you knew." The drive took us away from our modest neighborhood, climbing into the hills where the old villas stood, where wealth and power concentrated like storm clouds. I watched the landscape change through the car window, my hands clenched tight in my lap, the embroidered handkerchief I'd made that morning tucked into my sleeve like a talisman. We arrived at a villa that looked more like a fortress, stone walls thick and ancient, iron gates that opened silently at our approach, gardens that sprawled in geometric precision. This was where Lucian Marchetti lived, where he conducted business, where he ruled his empire. And now, where I would live too. Constantine helped me from the car, his touch surprisingly gentle. "The chapel is this way, Signorina. Your father is already inside." My legs trembled as I walked, the ivory dress whispering with each step. The chapel was small, tucked into a corner of the estate, lit by candles that cast dancing shadows across stone walls. The old priest stood at the altar, Bible in hand. My father sat in the first pew, his face anguished. And at the altar, waiting with absolute stillness, was Lucian Marchetti. My breath caught. I'd expected a monster, or at least someone whose face reflected the darkness of his reputation. Instead, I found a man who could have been carved from marble, classically handsome with sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, dark hair swept back from his face, and eyes the color of smoke on water. He wore a black suit that fit him like armor, hands clasped loosely in front of him, expression completely unreadable. He watched me approach with an intensity that made my skin prickle, as if he could see through the dress, through skin and bone, straight to the terrified girl beneath. I forced myself to keep walking, to keep my chin up, to not show the fear coursing through my veins like ice. When I reached his side, he spoke for the first time. His voice was low, measured, with the slight rasp of someone who chose words carefully because they mattered. "Valentina." Not a question, an acknowledgement. Lucien. I matched his tone, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me cower. Something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps? Or approval? Then it was gone, replaced by that same impenetrable calm. He turned to the priest and nodded once. The ceremony began. I heard the words as if from a great distance. Love, honor, cherish, sickness, health, death. All the promises I'd once imagined making to someone I chose. Someone who loved me. Someone who saw me as more than payment for a debt. Instead, I spoke them to a stranger whose cold expression never wavered, whose voice remained emotionless as he repeated his own vows. When the priest instructed us to exchange rings, Lucien produced a band of platinum set with a single perfect diamond. It slid onto my finger with the weight of a shackle. I had nothing to give him in return, but he'd anticipated that too. Constantine stepped forward with a simple platinum band that I placed on Lucien's finger with trembling hands. You may kiss your bride. I braced myself, expecting. I didn't know what. Force? Possession? Claim? Instead, Lucien leaned forward and pressed his lips to my forehead. So brief, so careful, it might have been an accident. Then he stepped back, the distance between us suddenly feeling like a canyon. It's done, he said quietly, though whether to me, the priest, or himself, I couldn't tell. And just like that, I was Valentina Marchetti, wife to the most feared man in Sicily, trapped in a marriage I never wanted, bound to a stranger I didn't know, beginning a life I couldn't imagine. As we left the chapel, Lucien didn't offer his arm. He simply walked ahead, expecting me to follow. Constantine fell into step beside me, his presence oddly comforting. Your belongings have been moved to the east wing, he said quietly. Mr. Marchetti thought you might prefer your own space while you adjust. My own space. Separate rooms. Relief warred with confusion. What kind of husband married a woman and then immediately gave her separate quarters? What was Lucien Marchetti's game? I found out soon enough. After showing me to a suite of rooms that were larger than my entire childhood home, Constantine left me alone. The space was beautiful. Antique furniture, silk curtains, a bed that looked like it belonged in a palace. My small trunk of embroidery supplies looked pathetic in the corner, a reminder of everything I'd lost. I waited, nerves stretched taut, for Lucien to arrive, for the wedding night that every terrified part of me had been dreading. Hours passed. Midnight came and went, and Lucien Marchetti never appeared. The first morning of my marriage, I woke alone in a bed large enough for 4 people, tangled in silk sheets I'd barely disturbed during a fitful night of half-sleep. Sunlight streamed through windows I'd forgotten to curtain, momentarily disorienting me. For a handful of heartbeats, I didn't remember. Then reality crashed back. The wedding, the chapel, the cold distance in Lucien Marchetti's eyes. My husband. The word felt foreign even in my thoughts. A soft knock interrupted my spiral of anxiety. Signora Marchetti? May I enter? I scrambled upright, pulling the sheets higher, despite being fully clothed in the nightgown I'd found laid out in the bathroom the previous night. Another gift from Lucien, I assumed. Another decision made for me. Yes. Come in. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. She carried a tray that smelled of coffee and fresh bread, and her smile was genuinely warm. Good morning, Signora. I'm Teresa, the head housekeeper. Mr. Marchetti asked me to ensure you had everything you needed. The mention of Lucien sent a flutter through my stomach. Part anxiety, part something else I didn't want to examine. Where is he? My husband? Teresa set the tray on the small table by the window, her movements practiced and efficient. Mr. Marchetti left for business early this morning. He said to tell you the villa and grounds are yours to explore as you wish, and to ask Teresa if you need anything. She paused, something sympathetic crossing her face. He also said he won't disturb you, Signora. You're to consider your rooms completely private. Won't disturb me. The phrasing was careful, diplomatic. What Teresa really meant was that Lucian had no intention of claiming his marital rights, of treating this as a real marriage in any meaningful sense. Relief flooded through me. I'd spent the night fearing his arrival, imagining scenarios that made my skin crawl, but alongside the relief came confusion. Why marry me at all if he intended to maintain such distance? Thank you, Teresa. I moved to the table, drawn by the smell of coffee. I appreciate your kindness. She smiled, warmer this time. It's my pleasure, Signora. It's nice to have a lady in the house again. The villa has felt too much like a fortress for too long. After Teresa left, I explored my new prison. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? A beautiful cage with silk sheets and antique furniture, but a cage nonetheless. The suite Lucian had assigned me included a bedroom, a sitting room, a luxurious bathroom, and, most surprisingly, a small room clearly meant for working. Someone had set up an embroidery station identical to my workshop at home. My trunk of supplies had been unpacked, organized, supplemented with materials I'd never been able to afford. Silk threads in every conceivable color lined the shelves. Hoops in various sizes hung from specially installed hooks. A basket in the corner held bolts of the finest linen and silk I'd ever touched. I sank into the chair, running my fingers over the smooth wood of the table. Who had done this? Lucian? Or had Constantine taken it upon himself? Either way, someone had paid attention to what mattered to me. Someone had tried, in their own way, to make this gilded cage more bearable. The handkerchief I'd embroidered the night before my wedding lay folded in my trunk. I pulled it out, studying the roses and thorns I'd stitched by candlelight. It seemed fitting somehow. Beauty wrapped around pain. Hope threaded through resignation. On impulse, I decided to give it to Lucian. A peace offering, perhaps. A small gesture to bridge the vast distance between us. The next 3 weeks established a pattern that was both comforting and maddening in its predictability. Lucian left early each morning before I woke. He returned late each evening, long after I'd retreated to my rooms. We ate meals separately. We moved through the villa like ghosts occupying different planes of existence, aware of each other, but never quite intersecting. I left the embroidered handkerchief on his desk in the study on my 5th day in the villa. It disappeared, though Lucian never mentioned it. I told myself he'd probably thrown it away, but some stubborn part of me hoped otherwise. Teresa became my primary source of human contact. She'd bring breakfast, share village gossip, ask about my embroidery projects. Through her, I learned the rhythms of the household. When Constantine arrived for meetings with Lucian, when the groundskeeper came to tend the gardens, when the chef prepared the meals that Lucian and I ate separately. You should explore the grounds, Signora, Teresa suggested one morning as she cleared away my breakfast dishes. The gardens are especially beautiful this time of year, and there's a small chapel on the eastern edge that overlooks the valley. I'd been avoiding the grounds, afraid of seeming too comfortable, too accepting of my circumstances. But Teresa was right. The villa felt increasingly suffocating. That afternoon I finally ventured outside. The gardens were magnificent. Geometric beds of roses and lavender stretched in precise rows, broken by marble fountains and stone benches positioned to catch the best views. I wandered the paths for nearly an hour, letting the sunshine and fresh air clear the cobwebs from my mind. The chapel Teresa mentioned sat at the far end of the property, a small stone building that looked centuries old. Its doors stood open, inviting. Inside, I found cool silence and stained glass windows that painted the floor in pools of colored light. Someone had left flowers on the altar, fresh flowers, recently placed. I sat in one of the pews, letting the peace of the space wash over me. This was what I'd needed, a moment away from the villa's luxury, from the constant awareness of Lucian's absence, from the confusion of my new life. "I thought I might find you here." I jumped at the voice, spinning to find Lucian standing in the doorway. The late afternoon sun backlit him, making it impossible to read his expression. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the first time we'd been alone since the wedding. The first time he'd sought me out deliberately. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, starting to rise. "I didn't mean to intrude." "It's not an intrusion." He moved into the chapel with that same controlled grace I remembered from the wedding, each step measured and deliberate. "The chapel is as much yours as mine now. More yours, perhaps. I rarely use it." He settled onto the pew across the aisle, maintaining careful distance. Up close, I could see the exhaustion in his face, the tension in his shoulders. Whatever business kept him away all day clearly took its toll. "Teresa said I could explore the grounds," I offered, unsure what else to say. "Teresa is right. This is your home now, Valentina. You're not a prisoner." His voice remained low, carefully neutral. "You're free to come and go as you please, though Constantine or one of his men will accompany you outside the estate for safety reasons." Safety. He meant his enemies, the ones who might see me as a weakness to exploit. I was free, but only within certain boundaries. Still, it was more than I'd expected. "Thank you." I hesitated, then added, "For the workshop. Someone set up a beautiful space for my embroidery." "Was that you?" Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. "I understand it's important to you. I wanted you to be able to continue your work." The handkerchief. I'd left it on his desk over 2 weeks ago, but still, I had to ask. Did you find something I left for you? On your desk?" This time the flicker lasted longer. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. His hand moved unconsciously to his breast pocket, a gesture so brief I almost missed it. "I did. It was beautiful. Thank you." He'd kept it. The realization sent an unexpected warmth through my chest. Lucian Marchetti, the cold mafioso who'd purchased a bride to settle a debt, had kept the handkerchief I'd made him, had carried it with him, if that unconscious gesture meant what I thought it did. "I'm glad you liked it." I gathered my courage, needing to understand something that had been eating at me since the wedding. "Lucien, why did you marry me?" "Really?" My father's debt wasn't that large, relatively speaking. You could have taken the villa, his tools, written off the rest as a loss. Why insist on this? Silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant sound of birds outside. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice so quiet I had to strain to hear. "Because sometimes the price of what we want isn't money. Sometimes it's something else entirely." He stood abruptly, as if the admission had cost him something. "I should return to work. Enjoy the grounds, Valentina. This is your home now. I want you to feel comfortable here." He was gone before I could press for more explanation, leaving me alone in the chapel with more questions than answers. What had he meant? What did Lucian Marchetti want that had required taking me as payment? Over the following weeks, I continued my tentative exploration of my new life. I established a routine, mornings in my workshop, afternoons in the gardens or exploring the villa's extensive library, evenings alone in my rooms. The isolation should have been depressing, but I found a strange peace in it. No one demanding things of me, no father to worry about, no creditors knocking at the door. Just blessed, quiet solitude. And yet, I found myself listening for Lucian's footsteps in the hallway. Found myself leaving small gifts in places I knew he'd find them. Another embroidered handkerchief, this one with olive branches. A bookmark stitched with his initials. A napkin edged with delicate lacework. Each one disappeared, never acknowledged but never rejected. It became a game of sorts, this silent conversation through embroidery. I'd create something, leave it where he'd find it, then wait to see if he'd respond. The responses were subtle. A book left on my sitting room table that I'd mentioned wanting to read, sheet music for a song I'd hummed while working, a bolt of silk in exactly the shade of blue I'd been searching for. We were communicating, Lucian and I, but only through these small, careful gestures. Never words. Never direct interaction beyond the handful of times we'd crossed paths in the villa's corridors. Always maintaining that careful distance, that wall of ice between us. Teresa noticed. "You're lonely, Signora," she said one morning, her voice gentle with concern. "This is no way for a young bride to live." "I'm fine," I assured her, not sure if I was lying. "I have my work." "Work isn't the same as companionship." She set down the coffee pot with more force than necessary. "Mr. Marchetti may be a good man in his way, but this situation isn't right. A husband and wife should know each other, spend time together. This separate lives business is unhealthy." I wanted to argue but couldn't. She was right. This wasn't a marriage. It was a business arrangement where both parties happened to live in the same building. But what could I do? Lucian had made it clear he wanted distance. Forcing interaction would only make things more uncomfortable for both of us. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered the villa's corridors. I'd never explored much beyond my wing, but insomnia made me bold. The villa was massive, rooms branching off in all directions, each more luxurious than the last. I found a music room with a grand piano that looked untouched, a gallery with paintings worth more than my childhood home, a solarium filled with exotic plants that thrived in the controlled environment. And then I found Lucian's office. I hadn't meant to enter. The door was slightly ajar, and light spilled into the darkened hallway. Curiosity drew me forward until I could see inside. Lucian sat at his desk, head bowed over paperwork, the desk lamp casting harsh shadows across his face. He'd loosened his tie, rolled up his shirt sleeves. For the first time since the wedding, he looked almost human, almost vulnerable. I should have left. Should have retreated to my rooms before he noticed me. Instead, I knocked softly on the doorframe. He looked up, surprise flashing across his features before he schooled them back to neutrality. "Valentina, it's late. Is everything all right?" I couldn't sleep. I hovered in the doorway, suddenly unsure. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you." "You're not." He gestured to one of the chairs across from his desk. "Would you like to come in?" I should have declined, should have made an excuse and left him to his work. Instead, I found myself crossing the threshold, settling into the offered chair. Up close, I could see the exhaustion etched into his features, the tension in his shoulders that never quite released. "You work too much," I observed quietly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "An occupational hazard." "Do you ever rest? Ever do something just because you enjoy it, not because it serves some business purpose?" "Not often." He set down his pen, giving me his full attention. "What about you? Are you settling in? Do you have everything you need?" "Yes, thank you." I hesitated, then decided to be honest. Though I'd be lying if I said I understood this situation. Us. Whatever this is. His expression shuddered slightly. "I know this isn't what you imagined for your marriage." "No," I agreed. "But it's also not as terrible as I feared. You've been kind, distant, but kind. I just wish I understood why." "Why I keep my distance?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those inscrutable gray eyes. "Because you didn't choose this, Valentina. You were forced into it by your father's mistakes. The least I can do is give you space, respect your boundaries, make this arrangement as painless as possible." "And what about what you want?" The question emerged before I could stop it. What did you mean in the chapel about the price of what we want? Lucian's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. For a long moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he stood, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens, his back to me. Some prices are too high to explain, he said finally. Some wants too complicated to justify. Go to bed, Valentina. It's late. It was a dismissal, gentle but firm. I rose, disappointment settling heavy in my chest. Whatever walls Lucian had built around himself, they weren't coming down tonight. Good night, Lucian. Good night. He didn't turn from the window. And Valentina, thank you for the gifts. They mean more than you know. I left before he could see the tears that suddenly threatened. Something about his admission, the rawness beneath the careful control, cracked something inside me. This man who'd claimed me as payment, who maintained such rigid distance, who worked himself to exhaustion managing an empire built on fear. This man appreciated my small offerings of embroidered beauty. Maybe, I thought as I returned to my rooms, there was more to Lucian Marchetti than the cold reputation suggested. Maybe beneath the ice, something warmer waited. Something worth trying to reach. I just had to figure out how to break through the walls he'd built so carefully around his heart. 6 months into our strange marriage, I finally began to understand the patterns of Lucian's life. The rigid schedule, the careful compartmentalization, the walls he maintained between different parts of himself. I learned that he took his coffee black at 5 a.m., that he spent Tuesdays with Constantine reviewing security protocols, that Thursday evenings were reserved for meetings with people who came and went through a side entrance I was carefully steered away from. I also learned that despite his best efforts to remain distant, Lucian was watching me. Not obviously, never intrusively, but I felt his attention like a physical weight. Teresa mentioned once that he asked about my days, about whether I seemed content, about whether I needed anything. Constantine, during one of our brief encounters in the garden, commented that Mr. Marchetti seemed more at ease knowing I was comfortable in the villa. It was strange, being observed from afar by a husband who barely spoke to me directly. But stranger still was how I'd begun to look for him too. Glimpses of him leaving in the morning, the sound of his voice through closed doors, the way the air in a room felt different when he'd recently occupied it. The embroidered gifts continued, my silent language in a conversation Lucian seemed unable or unwilling to have aloud. I made him a set of handkerchiefs, each embroidered with different patterns I thought might mean something to him. Strong oaks for stability, soaring eagles for ambition, stars for hope and darkness. I left them where he'd find them, then waited to see if they'd disappear like the others. They always did. My workshop became my refuge, the one place where I could create without overthinking the strangeness of my situation. I'd resumed taking commissions, though Teresa now handled the business arrangements, screening clients, delivering finished pieces. The income wasn't necessary. Lucian had made clear that everything I needed would be provided. But the work gave me purpose beyond being the invisible wife of a powerful man. One afternoon in late spring, I was working on an especially delicate christening gown when Teresa entered my workshop looking troubled. "Signora, there's someone here to see you. A woman named Isabella Corso. She says she's from the orphanage of Sant'Angelo." Sant'Angelo. The name sent a jolt through me. That was where I'd donated pieces over the years, including the handkerchief I'd been so proud of 2 years ago, the one with olive branches and doves, painstakingly detailed, poured full of prayers for the children who had so little. "Of course, please show her in." Isabella Corso was a petite woman in her 60s, with gentle eyes and hands marked by years of work. She carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who devoted her life to caring for others. "Signora Marchetti, thank you for seeing me." She settled into the chair I offered, her gaze sweeping over my workshop with appreciation. "What a beautiful space. Teresa mentioned you continue your embroidery work here." "I do. It helps." I set aside the christening gown. "Teresa said you're from Sant'Angelo. I used to donate pieces there before my marriage. Is everything all right with the children? The children are well, thanks in part to your generous donations over the years. Isabella smiled warmly. Your pieces brought such comfort, especially to the youngest ones. There was one in particular, a handkerchief with olive branches and doves, that became quite special to a little boy named Marco. He carried it everywhere after it was given to him. My throat tightened. I'm so glad it brought him comfort. Actually, that's why I'm here. Isabella's expression grew more serious. I wanted to thank you personally, but also to tell you something I think you should know. That handkerchief was never actually distributed to the children in the usual way. Confusion flickered through me. What do you mean? A man purchased it directly from us before it could be added to the general donations. He was quite insistent, said he wanted that specific piece, offered far more than its value. He comes to San Angelo regularly, has for years. Always makes generous anonymous donations, never asks for recognition. But that handkerchief was the first time he requested something specific. My pulse quickened. Who was this man? He never gave his name, but the children know him. They call him the Shadow Angel, because he only visits late in the evening, when the light is dim. He sits with the children, reads to them, listens to their stories. He's especially good with the ones who have nightmares, the traumatized ones. Isabella's voice softened. I didn't realize until recently that the Shadow Angel was your husband, Signora Marchetti. The workshop seemed to tilt. Lucian? Yes, when I discovered who you'd married, I made the connection. Mr. Marchetti has been supporting Sant'Angelo for over 15 years. He was a resident there himself as a young boy, from ages 7 to 12, after his mother died, and before his uncle claimed him. The orphanage shaped him in profound ways. I couldn't speak. Lucian, cold, distant Lucian, had been a traumatized child at Sant'Angelo, had grown up without family, without stability, until his uncle had drawn him into the world of organized crime. And now he returned regularly, offering comfort to children who reminded him of who he'd been. And my handkerchief, the one I'd made with such care, pouring beauty into every stitch. He'd wanted it specifically, had paid for it before it could be given to a child, had kept it for himself. I thought you should know, Isabella continued gently, because I suspect Mr. Marchetti would never tell you himself. He's a very private man. But his connection to Sant'Angelo, to the work we do there, it's important to him. And your embroidery touched something in him. I saw his face when he held that handkerchief. It mattered. After Isabella left, I sat in my workshop for a long time, the christening gown forgotten. Everything I thought I understood about my marriage had just shifted. Lucian hadn't simply purchased a bride to settle a debt. He'd specifically wanted me. Why? Because I was the creator of a piece of embroidery that had meant something to him? Because I donated beauty to the orphanage that had raised him? The question spiraled, but one thing became clear. I needed to see Sant'Angelo for myself. Needed to understand this part of Lucian he kept hidden. Needed to walk the halls where he'd been a frightened boy. Needed to witness whatever it was that drew him back again and again. That evening, I waited in the sitting room off the main entry, knowing Lucian would pass through on his way to his office. When he finally appeared, exhaustion evident in every line of his body, I called out before I could lose my courage. Lucian, could we talk? Please? He paused, surprise flickering across his features. Of course. Is something wrong? No, I had a visitor today. Isabella Corso from Sant'Angelo. Every muscle in his body went rigid. His expression, usually so carefully controlled, showed something raw. Fear, perhaps? Or vulnerability. What did she tell you? About your connection to the orphanage. about how you support them, visit the children. I stood, crossing to where he stood frozen in the doorway. About how you specifically purchased the handkerchief I made 2 years ago. Valentina, why didn't you tell me? The question emerged softer than I intended. Why let me think you were just collecting a debt, when really you wanted... I faltered, unsure how to finish. Wanted what? His voice was rough, stripped of its usual control. To tell you I'd been watching you for 2 years, that I'd seen you drop off donations at Sant'Angelo, had seen the care you put into every piece, that when I saw that handkerchief, saw the olive branches and doves you'd embroidered with such hope, I knew I'd found something rare and precious. My breath caught. You were watching me? Not stalking, he clarified quickly. But yes, I noticed you. I couldn't help it. You brought beauty to a place that had known so much pain, offered comfort without expecting anything in return. When your father's debt came to me, when I realized you were the same woman who'd created that handkerchief. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. I saw an opportunity to bring you here, to keep you safe, to have you close in the only way I knew how. By forcing me into marriage, I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice by offering you protection in a world that destroys gentle things. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw past the ice to the fire burning beneath. I knew it was selfish, knew it was wrong, but the thought of you continuing to struggle, of you potentially falling prey to other creditors, other men less. He broke off, jaw tightening. I wanted you here. I wanted you safe, even if it meant you'd hate me for it. I don't hate you. The admission emerged in a whisper. I don't understand you, but I don't hate you. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe, or longing. His hand lifted as if to touch my face, then dropped back to his side. I should get back to work. Wait. I caught his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. Take me to Sant'Angelo. Tomorrow. I want to see it, understand what it means to you. Please. He studied me for a long moment, something working behind his eyes. Finally, he nodded. Tomorrow evening. I'll cancel my other commitments. True to his word, the next evening Lucian's car was waiting. We drove in comfortable silence through the winding roads that led to the coastal village where Sant'Angelo stood. The orphanage was smaller than I'd imagined, housed in an old monastery that had been converted for its current purpose. But the gardens were well maintained, the building freshly painted, signs of the money Lucian had poured into keeping it running. Isabella met us at the entrance, her face lighting up when she saw Lucian. Mr. Marchetti, we weren't expecting you tonight, but you're always welcome. And you brought Signora Marchetti. Wonderful. I wanted her to see the place, Lucian said quietly, if that's acceptable. Of course, of course. Come in. The interior was clean and cheerful, walls painted in warm colors, corridors lined with children's artwork. Lucian moved through the space with familiar ease, greeting staff by name, pausing to smile at children who called out to him. The transformation was remarkable, the cold mafioso melting into something warmer, more approachable, more human. We stopped in a common room where several children were playing before bedtime. A little boy, perhaps 6 years old, spotted Lucian and ran over, nearly tripping in his excitement. Mr. Shadow, you came. Did you bring a story? Lucian crouched to the boy's level, his entire demeanor softening. Not tonight, Marco, but I brought someone special I wanted you to meet. This is my wife, Valentina. She's the one who made that handkerchief you like so much. Marco's eyes widened. He dug into his pocket and pulled out a worn piece of fabric. My handkerchief, the one Isabella had said was given to him. But it wasn't the original. Someone had carefully repaired it, reinforced the edges, preserved it despite obvious heavy use. "You made this?" Marco's voice was awed. "It's my favorite thing. It helps when I have bad dreams." My throat tightened as I knelt beside Lucian. "I'm so glad it helps you. Do you have bad dreams often?" Marco nodded solemnly. "Sometimes I dream about before I came here, when things were scary. But then I look at the doves and remember that Mr. Shadow says there's always hope, even in the dark." I glanced at Lucian, saw the naked emotion in his face before he controlled it. He'd given Marco the handkerchief, my handkerchief, the one he'd purchased before it could be distributed, after using it himself. Had given this traumatized child something that had brought him comfort first. We stayed for over an hour. Lucian read stories to the younger children, his deep voice gentle and soothing. I helped some of the older girls with an embroidery project they were working on, teaching them stitches and patterns. Isabella showed me the improvements Lucian's donations had funded: a new playground, updated dormitories, a classroom equipped with computers and books. "He never takes credit publicly," Isabella confided as we watched Lucian with the children. "Insists everything remain anonymous. But the children know. They know he's the reason they have these opportunities, the reason Sant'Angelo survived when so many other orphanages closed." On the drive back, I couldn't contain my questions any longer. "How long were you there? At Sant'Angelo?" 5 years. Lucian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "My mother died when I was 7. Car accident. She had no family, no support system. I ended up at Sant'Angelo because there was nowhere else to go." "And your uncle? The one who claimed you?" His expression hardened. "Lorenzo Marchetti. He didn't want me. He wanted an heir to train, someone to inherit his empire. He saw potential in me, I suppose. Intelligence that could be shaped into something useful. He pulled me out of Sant'Angelo when I was 12 and thrust me into a world I wasn't ready for." "Did you want to leave?" I asked softly. "No." The word was barely audible. Sant'Angelo was the closest thing to home I'd known since losing my mother. Isabella and the other staff, they cared. They saw me as a child who needed nurturing, not a tool to be sharpened. But I didn't have a choice. Lorenzo was family, and family had legal rights. "So you do understand," I murmured, "what it's like to have your life decided by others, to be claimed as property rather than cherished as a person." He glanced at me, something raw in his expression. "Yes, I understand, which is why I tried to make this as painless as possible for you. Why I gave you space, freedom within the bounds of safety. I never wanted you to feel as trapped as I did at 12. But you still trapped me," I pointed out, though without anger. "Just in a prettier cage." "I know." His voice dropped. "I know it was selfish. But when I saw the chance to have you here, to keep you safe, to..." He trailed off, seeming to struggle with words. "To have something beautiful in my life that wasn't tainted by violence and obligation. I couldn't let that pass." We arrived back at the villa, but neither of us moved to exit the car. The darkness and enclosed space made confession easier somehow, removed the need to maintain careful facades. "The handkerchief," I said quietly. "The one you gave to Marco. You'd kept it first, hadn't you? Used it yourself?" "Yes." No hesitation. "I saw you deliver it to Sant'Angelo 2 years ago. Watched you through the window as you arranged it with the other donations, as you touched it one last time before leaving. The care you'd put into it was visible in every stitch. I went inside after you left and told Isabella I wanted to purchase it. She refused at first, said all donations went directly to the children. But I offered enough money to fund the new playground, and she relented. And you kept it with you?" "Not a question. Always. In my pocket, close to my heart. It reminded me that beauty still existed in the world, that not everything had to be bought with blood and fear, that somewhere, A woman with talented hands created hope from thread and fabric. He finally turned to face me fully. Then Marco arrived. 7 years old, traumatized from abuse, nightmares every night. I saw myself in him so clearly it hurt. And I thought, maybe what brought me comfort could help him too. Tears burned my eyes. So you gave it away. So I gave it to someone who needed it more. His hand moved as if to touch my face, then fell back. But I never forgot you, Valentina. Never stopped watching when you came to Sant'Angelo. Never stopped hoping I might find a way to. To what? I whispered. To know you. The admission seemed to cost him. To have you in my life in any capacity you'd allow. When your father's debt arrived on my desk, I saw it as fate. A sign. I know that makes me sound mad, but it doesn't. I reached across the space between us, my fingers finding his. His hand was warm, larger than mine, and it trembled slightly at my touch. It makes you sound lonely, like someone who found one beautiful thing in a dark world and couldn't let it go. His fingers curled around mine, grip careful but firm. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. For all of it. For taking your choice away. For binding you to me when you deserved so much better. For being too damaged to know how to love you the way you should be loved. Lucian. But I won't apologize for keeping you safe, he continued. Or for treasuring every gift you've given me. Or for falling in love with you long before I had any right to. The world stopped. What? I love you. He said it simply, factually, as if stating something obvious. I've loved you since I first saw you embroidering hope into fabric at Sant'Angelo. I loved you on our wedding day, though I knew you could never feel the same. I love you now, sitting here in the darkness, finally brave enough to speak the truth. His thumb traced patterns on my palm. I don't expect you to return it. I know what our marriage is. A business arrangement you were forced into. But I wanted you to know. After 2 years of watching from afar and 8 months of living as strangers under the same roof, you deserve to know the truth. I couldn't speak. Couldn't process the magnitude of what he was confessing. Lucian Marchetti, the cold mafioso who'd claimed me as payment, had been in love with me for 2 years, had married me not out of cruel opportunism, but out of desperate longing, had maintained rigid distance not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. Say something, he pleaded softly, even if it's to tell me I'm a fool. Instead of words, I leaned across the center console and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question rather than an answer. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then his free hand came up to cradle my face with devastating tenderness, and he kissed me back with all the longing he'd been suppressing for 2 years. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. Valentina, I don't love you yet, I admitted honestly. But I could. I think I'm already starting to. And I want to try, Lucian. I want to know the man who reads to traumatized children and keeps embroidered handkerchiefs over his heart. The man who built walls to protect a heart that's been broken too many times. I want to learn to love him, if he'll let me. Yes. The word emerged rough, choked. God, yes. We sat there in the darkness of the car, holding each other. 2 people who'd been forced together now choosing to stay. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was still too much between us. Too many walls to dismantle. Too much damage to heal. But it was a beginning. A real one. Built on honesty and hope, and the kind of fragile trust that has to be earned one small gesture at a time. The morning after our conversation in the car, I woke to find a note slipped under my door. Lucian's handwriting was precise, controlled, so much like the man himself. Breakfast together? The terrace at 8 if you're willing. L. My heart fluttered as I read it. Such a simple request, but it felt monumental. In 8 months of marriage, we'd never shared a meal. Never sat across from each other in daylight without the buffer of ceremony or accident. This was intentional. This was him trying. I arrived at the terrace at 7:55, nerves making me early. Lucian was already there, standing by the stone railing that overlooked the gardens. He'd dressed casually, or what passed for casual in his world. Dark slacks, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, no tie. His hair was slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered. When he heard my footsteps, he turned, and the expression on his face, vulnerable, hopeful, uncertain, made my breath catch. "You came," he said, as if there'd been doubt. Of course I came. I moved to the table Teresa had set with fresh flowers, and what looked like enough food to feed 6 people. "Did you think I wouldn't?" I thought. He hesitated, then seemed to decide on honesty. "I thought you might have regrets this morning, about what was said last night, about the kiss." "No regrets." I settled into one of the chairs, watching as he did the same across from me. Nervous, maybe. Uncertain about how to navigate this new territory. But no regrets. Something in his shoulders relaxed. Teresa appeared with coffee, her smile knowing as she poured for both of us before discreetly retreating. Lucian fixed his the way I'd learned he preferred. Black, no sugar, while I added cream and watched the liquid swirl and blend. "I've been thinking," Lucian began, his fingers wrapped around his cup, as if needing something to hold. "About what you said. About wanting to know me. I'd like that, Valentina, but I need you to understand what you're asking for." "What do you mean?" His gaze was direct, unflinching. "I'm not a good man. I've done things that would make you recoil. I've hurt people, destroyed lives, made decisions that haunt me. The empire I inherited from Lorenzo. It's built on fear and blood. I've tried to legitimize portions of it, to move toward cleaner business, but some stains don't wash away easily." "I know what you are," I said quietly. "I've known since the wedding. Since before, if I'm honest. Everyone in Sicily knows what the Marchetti family does. Knowing in abstract and knowing in detail are different things." He set down his cup, leaning forward slightly. "If we do this, if we truly try to build something real between us, there can't be secrets. You'll need to understand the reality of my life, the dangers that come with it, the moral compromises I've made. And you'll need to decide if you can live with that." I considered his words carefully. He was right. I'd known he was involved in organized crime, but I'd kept that knowledge vague, undefined. Actually confronting the specifics would be different, harder, but also necessary if we were going to move forward honestly. "Then tell me," I said. "Not everything at once. I don't think I could process that. But start somewhere. Help me understand." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he spoke again, his voice was measured, careful. "My uncle Lorenzo built his power on protection rackets, gambling, and strategic violence. When he died and I took over at 25, I inherited all of it. I was young, angry, and desperate to prove myself. I made decisions in those early years that I'm not proud of." "What kind of decisions?" "The kind where people disappeared when they became problems, where examples had to be made to maintain control, where mercy was seen as weakness. So I learned not to show it." His jaw tightened. "I told myself it was necessary, that this was the world I'd been born into, the only path available to me. But necessity and righteousness aren't the same thing." "And now?" I asked. "Are you still that person?" "Some days." His honesty was brutal. "When threats emerge, when someone challenges my authority, when the people I'm responsible for are in danger, yes, I can still be that person. But I've tried to change, to find other ways. Constantine helps with that. He's been pushing me toward legitimate business for years, toward finding solutions that don't require violence. Is that why you support Sant'Angelo? And other charities, I assume? To balance the scales? A bitter smile touched his lips. You can't balance those scales, Valentina. No amount of charity erases blood. But yes, I try to do some good. To create something positive from the wealth I've accumulated through morally ambiguous means. It doesn't absolve me, but it means something matters beyond just power and control. I absorbed this, letting the truth of who he was settle into my understanding. He watched me carefully, as if expecting rejection. Instead, I reached across the table, my hand finding his. Thank you for being honest. I know that wasn't easy. His fingers closed around mine, grip almost desperate. You're not. Repulsed? I'm processing, I admitted. But no, not repulsed. You've been shaped by circumstances beyond your control, Lucian. That doesn't excuse everything, but it provides context. And I can see you're trying to be better. That matters. I want to be better for you. His voice dropped. I want to be the kind of man who deserves you, even though I know I never truly will. Stop that. I squeezed his hand firmly. Stop deciding you're unworthy before giving us a chance. We're both learning here. How to be married, how to trust, how to build something real from an arranged foundation. That takes time and patience and forgiveness. From both of us. Something shifted in his expression, hope breaking through the habitual cynicism. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, but you have it anyway. I smiled softly. Now, can we please eat? Teresa will be heartbroken if we let all this food go to waste. The tension broke. Lucian laughed, actually laughed, and the sound transformed his entire face. For a moment, I glimpsed the boy he must have been before life hardened him, before Lorenzo molded him into something colder. We ate breakfast together, conversation flowing more easily than I'd expected. He asked about my embroidery projects, seeming genuinely interested in the technical details of different stitches and patterns. I asked about the legitimate parts of his business, the real estate holdings, the import company, the restaurant chain. Neutral territory where we could learn each other's rhythms without diving into darker waters. There's a charity gala next month, Lucian mentioned as Teresa cleared away our plates. In Palermo, several business associates will be there, along with politicians and society figures. I typically attend alone, but... He paused, something vulnerable entering his expression. Would you consider coming with me? As my wife, publicly? The request was significant. In 8 months, we'd never appeared together socially, never acknowledged our marriage beyond the legal paperwork. This would be a statement, to his world and mine, that we were truly together. I'd like that, I said, watching relief wash over his features. Though I'll need something appropriate to wear. I'll arrange for a stylist to visit with options. He caught himself. Unless you'd prefer to choose yourself, I don't want to make decisions for you. The consideration warmed me. He was trying so hard to give me agency, to make up for the choice he'd stolen when forcing this marriage. A stylist would be helpful, actually. I wouldn't know where to begin dressing for that kind of event. Over the following weeks, our mornings together became routine. Breakfast on the terrace when weather permitted, in the smaller dining room when it didn't. Lucian still left early for business most days, still returned late most evenings. But now he sought me out afterward. Small conversations in the library, walks through the gardens as the sun set, moments of connection that gradually built trust between us. I continued leaving embroidered gifts, but now with explicit acknowledgement. A bookmark for the book he was reading, a handkerchief monogrammed with his initials for his breast pocket, a small wall hanging for his office depicting the view from Sant'Angelo. Olive trees and ocean, peace captured in thread. "I love this," he said when he saw the wall hanging, his fingers tracing the embroidered waves. "How do you capture movement in something stationary?" "By understanding what stillness looks like right before motion," I explained, moving to stand beside him. "The wave hasn't crested yet, but you can see it's about to. The olive branches haven't bent in the wind, but the leaves are positioned to show they will. It's about potential, showing the moment before something changes." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. Like us, I agreed softly. The night of the gala arrived faster than I expected. The stylist had provided a midnight blue gown that hugged my curves before flowing to the floor, elegant and understated. Teresa helped with my hair and makeup, her excitement palpable. "Mr. Marchetti won't be able to take his eyes off you," she predicted, pinning the final curl into place. When I descended the main staircase, Lucian was waiting in the foyer. His sharp intake of breath when he saw me sent heat through my veins. He wore a tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders, his dark hair perfectly styled, every inch the powerful man the world knew him to be. But his eyes held nothing but awe as he watched me approach. "Valentina." My name emerged rough, reverent. "You're stunning. You clean up well yourself." I accepted the hand he offered, letting him guide me down the final steps. Up close, I could smell his cologne, sandalwood and something darker, more complex. His gaze dropped to the necklace I wore, a simple gold chain with a small pendant. "Is that?" "The first button from the shirt you wore on our wedding day." I touched it lightly. I saved it, had it made into a pendant. I thought, if I'm wearing something that represents our beginning, even a difficult one, it might remind me that beginnings can lead to better things. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. How did I get so lucky? "You didn't," I said honestly. "You manipulated circumstances to force an outcome you wanted. But you're trying to make it right, and that counts for something. I'll spend my life making it right if you'll let me." The gala was overwhelming. Hundreds of people in a ballroom that dripped with crystal and gold, champagne flowing freely, conversations conducted in the coded language of the wealthy and powerful. Lucian kept me close, his hand at the small of my back, introducing me to associates whose names I instantly forgot. His wife, he called me, with unmistakable pride. Not his business arrangement or his convenient solution to a debt problem. His wife. "She's lovely, Lucian," one elderly woman commented, her sharp eyes assessing me. "Where has she been hiding all these months?" "Adjusting to married life," Lucian replied smoothly. "I wanted to give her time to settle in before throwing her into this circus." The woman laughed. "Smart man. Too many grooms parade their new brides around like trophies before the poor girls know which fork to use." She turned to me, her expression warming. "Don't let him work too much, dear. These men will bury themselves in business if we don't drag them out occasionally." As she moved away, I leaned closer to Lucian. "She seems kind." "Donna Castellano. Her husband ran the Eastern Territories before he died. She's retired now, but still commands respect." He guided me toward a quieter corner. "Are you doing all right? I know this is a lot." "I'm fine, though I wouldn't mind some air soon." "The terrace is just through those doors. Let's—" Lucian Marchetti, the voice that interrupted, was smooth, cultured, and carried an undercurrent of menace that made my skin prickle. "I heard rumors you'd finally taken a wife. Mikhail Volkov. I don't believe we've been introduced." The man who'd appeared was perhaps 40, handsome in a cold way, with pale eyes that assessed me like I was a piece on a chessboard. Lucian's entire body had gone rigid, his hand tightening protectively on my waist. "Volkov." The name emerged flat, unwelcoming. What brings you to Palermo? Business opportunities. Volkov's smile didn't reach his eyes. And curiosity about the woman who finally captured the great Lucian Marchetti's attention. She must be extraordinary to make you drop your guard after all these years. The threat was barely veiled. Lucian's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. Valentina is my wife and under my protection. That's all you need to know. Of course, Volkov inclined his head with mock courtesy. Please give Donna Castellano my regards. I believe I saw her near the champagne fountain. He melted back into the crowd, but the damage was done. Lucian's entire demeanor had shifted, the careful control replaced by something harder, more dangerous. He guided me toward the exit with barely restrained urgency. We're leaving. Lucian, what? Now. Not angry at me, but at the situation, at Volkov, at the danger that had just become very real. In the car, he pulled out his phone, firing off rapid texts to Konstantin. I watched the city lights blur past, my mind churning with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Who is Mikhail Volkov? I finally asked. Lucian's hand found mine in the darkness, grip tight. Someone dangerous. Someone I've been working to keep away from my territory. And now he knows about you. Is that a problem? Yes. No hesitation. Because men like Volkov look for weaknesses to exploit. And you, Valentina, are my greatest weakness. His voice dropped. But also my greatest strength, which is why I need you to trust me. Whatever happens next, whatever measures I have to take, trust that it's all to keep you safe. Fear coiled in my stomach, but I squeezed his hand. I trust you. That may change, he said quietly. When you see what I become when people I love are threatened. We arrived back at the villa to find additional security posted at the gates, in the gardens, throughout the house. Konstantin was waiting in the foyer, his expression grim. We've secured the perimeter and increased patrols. I've reached out to our contacts in Volkov's organization. Seems he's been sniffing around our operations for weeks. Tonight was deliberate positioning. And Sant'Angelo? Lucian's voice was sharp. Double security, all under the guise of routine maintenance. Isabella has been briefed to refuse any visitors she doesn't personally recognize. Good. Lucian turned to me, his face softening slightly. Valentina, I need you to stay close to the villa for the next few days. No trips to town, no visiting the village. Konstantin or one of his men will be with you whenever you're outside your rooms. You think Volkov would actually try something? I think he's probing for weaknesses. Tonight was reconnaissance. Seeing how I react, measuring my attachment to you. Now that he knows you matter to me, he'll look for ways to exploit that. His hand came up to cut my face. I won't let him near you, I promise. The increased security became my new normal. Konstantin or one of his men, Antonio, Marco, or the silent but efficient Sergio, accompanied me everywhere. Even in the gardens, even in the villa itself, I was never truly alone. Lucian had transformed our home into a fortress, and while I understood the necessity, the constant surveillance wore on my nerves. 3 days after the gala, I was in my workshop trying to lose myself in embroidery when Lucian appeared in the doorway. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, tension radiating from his shoulders. He'd been working nearly around the clock, I knew, coordinating with Konstantin to shore up vulnerabilities in his operations. Can I come in? He asked, as if this wasn't his house, as if he needed permission to enter any room. Of course. I set aside the piece I'd been working on, a table runner with intricate geometric patterns that required intense concentration I couldn't muster. You look terrible. Thank you, he said dryly, but moved to sit in the chair across from my work table. I wanted to update you on the situation. My stomach tightened. Has something happened? Nothing direct. But Volkov's been making moves, talking to my suppliers, approaching my business partners, spreading rumors about instability in my organization. His jaw tightened. It's psychological warfare. He's trying to make me seem weak, vulnerable, and he's using you as evidence. Me? How? By suggesting that marriage has softened me, that I've become sentimental, distracted by domestic concerns. In our world, sentiment is seen as weakness, Valentina. Men like Volkov believe love makes you compromised, easier to manipulate. And is it true? I asked quietly. Does loving me make you weaker? His eyes met mine, fierce and unwavering. It makes me more dangerous, because now I have something worth fighting for beyond just power and territory. But it also creates vulnerabilities I didn't have before. Volkov knows that if he threatens you, I'll respond. He's counting on that response being reckless, emotional, giving him opportunities to strike. So what do? We're careful, we're smart, and we wait for him to make a mistake. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I've dealt with men like Volkov before. They're patient predators, but they're also arrogant. Eventually he'll overreach, and when he does, we'll be ready. I hated the casual way he spoke about violence and strategy, hated that my life had become a piece in some brutal chess game. But I also understood that this was his reality, had been his reality long before I entered it, and now it was mine too. There's something else, Lucian continued, his voice dropping. I need to attend a meeting tomorrow, in Messina. It's with several associates who are concerned about recent developments. I need to reassure them, demonstrate strength and stability. How long will you be gone? Overnight. Maybe 2 days if negotiations run longer than expected. His hand reached across the space between us, finding mine. I don't want to leave you. Not now. But this meeting is necessary to shore up alliances we'll need if Volkov escalates. Then go. I squeezed his hand. I'll be fine. Constantine will be here, and half of Sicily's security force seems to be camped on our grounds. Promise me you'll stay inside. No garden walks, no terrace visits, just the villa interior. Lucian, please. The single word held so much. Fear, desperation, love barely contained. I can do what needs to be done in Messina if I know you're safe here. If I'm worrying about you, I'll be compromised, and that puts us both in more danger. Put that way, I couldn't refuse. I promise. Villa interior only until you return. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that felt like a vow. I'll be back as soon as I can. And Valentina? If anything happens, anything at all, you do exactly what Constantine tells you. No questions, no hesitation. He has instructions to get you to safety by any means necessary. The seriousness in his voice sent ice through my veins. You're frightening me. Good. His honesty was brutal. Fear keeps you alert. Alert keeps you alive. This isn't a game, and Volkov isn't a man who plays by rules. If he sees an opportunity, he'll take it. Consequences be damned. Lucian left before dawn the next morning. I woke to find a note on my nightstand. Just a few words in his precise handwriting. Stay safe. Come back to me. L. The villa felt different without him. Larger, colder, more fortress than home. I kept my promise, staying within the interior walls, but the restriction made me restless. I tried to work on embroidery projects but couldn't concentrate. Tried to read but found the words sliding past without comprehension. By afternoon, I was pacing my sitting room like a caged animal. Constantine appeared around 4 o'clock, his expression carefully neutral. Signora Marchetti, everything all right? Fine, just restless. I forced a smile. Any word from Lucian? He arrived safely in Messina. The meeting is progressing as expected. Constantine hesitated, then added, "He asked me to check on you every few hours. Make sure you have everything you need." "I'm fine, Constantine. Truly. You don't need to babysit me." "With respect, Signora, ensuring your safety is my highest priority right now." Mr. Marchetti was very clear about that. I softened, recognizing the position Lucian had put him in. "I know. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm not used to being watched so closely. I understand, but it won't be for much longer. Once the Volkov situation resolves, things will return to normal. Except normal for me would still mean being married to a man whose business required armed guards and strategic violence. That was my reality now, for better or worse. That night, I couldn't sleep. The villa was too quiet without Lucian's presence, too aware of its own emptiness. I found myself wandering the halls around 2 a.m., wrapped in a robe, seeking something. Comfort, maybe. Connection. Proof that I wasn't entirely alone. I ended up in Lucian's office, the room he'd been so carefully keeping me out of for months. The door was unlocked, an oversight probably caused by his rushed departure. I knew I shouldn't enter, that this was a violation of the trust we'd been building. But curiosity won out over propriety. The office was exactly as I'd expected. Organized, austere, dominated by a massive desk and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. But what drew my attention was a glass case mounted on the wall behind the desk. Inside, carefully preserved and beautifully displayed, were all the embroidered pieces I'd made for him over the past months. The handkerchiefs, the bookmark, the wall hanging, all treated like precious artifacts. And in the center, given the place of honor, was the original handkerchief, the one with olive branches and doves, the one I'd made 2 years ago for Sant'Angelo, the one he'd purchased and kept before eventually giving it to Marco. Except this wasn't the same handkerchief. Looking closer, I realized he'd commissioned an exact replica. Same pattern, same colors, same dimensions. He'd given the original to Marco but kept this copy for himself. Had someone recreate the piece that had meant so much to him? Tears blurred my vision. This cold, dangerous man who'd forced me into marriage had been carrying proof of his love for 2 years. Had treasured my work like some people treasured photographs or love letters. Had built a shrine to our connection before I'd even known his name. I was wondering when you'd find that. I spun to find Constantine in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have..." "He wouldn't mind." Constantine moved into the office, his gaze moving to the glass case. "He comes in here sometimes late at night, just to look at them. I found him standing exactly where you are, touching the glass like he could feel the stitches through it. Why didn't he tell me? Why keep this hidden?" "Because Mr. Marchetti doesn't know how to accept that he deserves beautiful things. He spent his whole life believing he's a monster, that anything good he touches will be corrupted by association. Your work, it's proof he's wrong. But admitting that means admitting he's worthy of love, and that's a truth he's not ready to face." I wiped at my eyes, trying to compose myself. "He told me he loved me, in the car after Sant'Angelo." "I know. He called me afterward, sounding terrified that he'd ruined everything by being too honest." Constantine's voice gentled. "But he's trying, Signora. For you, he's trying to be better than what he was made to be." "I know." I looked back at the display case, at the tangible evidence of Lucian's hidden heart. "I just wish he'd let me see this side of him more often, instead of hiding behind walls. The walls protected him when he had nothing else." Constantine moved to stand beside me. "But they're also the hardest thing to tear down. Be patient with him. He'll get there." We stood in companionable silence for a moment, before Constantine cleared his throat. "You should get some rest, Signora. Mr. Marchetti will likely return tomorrow afternoon, and he'll want to see you looking well, not exhausted from midnight wandering." I nodded, but before leaving, I pulled the embroidered square I'd been working on from my robe pocket, the one with roses and thorns I'd made the night before my wedding. I placed it on Lucian's desk where he'd see it immediately upon returning. A small message that I understood what the display case meant, that I wasn't running from the truth of his feelings. The next day crawled past with agonizing slowness. Constantine received periodic updates from Messina. The meetings were going well, alliances being reinforced, Lucian handling the politics with his usual controlled competence. But he wouldn't be back until evening at the earliest. I tried to work, to read, to do anything productive. Instead, I found myself back in Lucian's office, studying the display case, trying to see myself through his eyes. What had he seen in my work that inspired such devotion? What had I unknowingly offered that had captured the heart of a man everyone believed had none? Around 6 o'clock, as the sun was beginning its descent, the sound of raised voices from the foyer made me tense. I moved toward the office door, opening it slightly to hear better. Can't see her. Mr. Marchetti was explicit about visitors. Constantine's voice, firm but controlled. I'm not a visitor. I'm his business partner. The responding voice was smooth, cultured, and sickeningly familiar. Mikhail Volkov. And I have urgent information he'd want me to share with his lovely wife. Ice flooded my veins. Volkov was here, in the villa, while Lucian was still hours away in Messina. Signora Marchetti is not receiving visitors, Constantine repeated. You can deliver any messages to me. The message is for her specifically, about her husband's current activities in Messina. I think she'd be very interested to learn what Lucian Marchetti is really doing up there. I should have stayed hidden, should have trusted Constantine to handle this. Instead, some stubborn part of me, the part that had kept creating beauty in a harsh world, that had agreed to build a real marriage with a difficult man, made me step out of the office. I'll see him, I called down the hallway. In the sitting room, Constantine, with you present. Constantine's expression showed clear disapproval, but he nodded once. As you wish, Signora. Volkov was even more unsettling in the villa than he'd been at the gala. He moved through the space like he owned it, his pale eyes cataloging everything, looking for weaknesses. When I entered the sitting room with Constantine at my side, Volkov's smile was the predator recognizing prey. Signora Marchetti, how gracious of you to see me despite your husband's probable disapproval. My husband isn't here to approve or disapprove, I said, keeping my voice level. You said you had information. Deliver it and leave. Direct, I like that. He settled into a chair without invitation. Your husband is currently in Messina conducting business, but not the business he told you about. I'm not interested in rumors. Not rumors. Facts. Volkov pulled out his phone, showing me a photograph. Lucian in what looked like a warehouse, surrounded by men I didn't recognize, standing near crates marked with shipping labels. He's finalizing a weapons shipment, illegal arms that will end up in the hands of militias throughout Eastern Europe. Thousands of guns that will kill thousands of people. All so your husband can increase his profit margins. The image blurred as I stared at it. Lucian had said he was meeting with associates, reinforcing alliances. He hadn't mentioned weapons. Hadn't mentioned this aspect of his business at all. Why are you showing me this? I managed to ask. Because you deserve to know who you married. Volkov's voice was almost gentle, almost kind. Lucian Marchetti is very good at presenting himself as civilized, at pretending he's more than just a criminal with expensive taste. But underneath, he's a monster who profits from death and calls it business. Is that really the man you want to build a life with? Constantine stepped forward, his hand moving to his weapon. That's enough. Leave now before I remove you forcibly. Volkov raised his hands in mock surrender. I'm going, but think about what I've shown you, Signora Marchetti. Think about whether love is enough to overlook blood on your husband's hands. He moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and tell Lucian that his security has more holes than he realizes. I walked in here easier than I should have. Makes you wonder what else I could access, doesn't it? The moment he was gone, Constantine was on his phone, barking orders to increase patrols, to seal potential breach points, to notify Lucian immediately. I sank into a chair, my mind spinning. The photograph. Lucian surrounded by illegal weapons. Was it real? Had he lied about the purpose of the Messina trip? Or was this more of Volkov's psychological warfare, truth mixed with lies to create maximum damage? Signora. Constantine crouched before me, his expression earnest. Whatever Volkov showed you, it's designed to manipulate, to drive a wedge between you and Mr. Marchetti. Don't let him succeed. Is it true? I asked. The weapons? Constantine's hesitation was answer enough. Mr. Marchetti's business is complicated. Not everything he does is... Just answer the question. Does Lucian deal in illegal weapons? Yes. The admission was quiet but honest. Among other things, he's been trying to phase out the more questionable operations. But it takes time. You can't dismantle an empire overnight without creating power vacuums that others will fill more brutally. I pressed my hands over my face, trying to process this. I'd known Lucian wasn't clean. Had known his empire included illegal activities. But weapons felt different somehow, more directly connected to violence and death. Those guns would kill people. And Lucian profited from that. He's trying to be better, Constantine continued. For you. The changes he's implementing, the shift toward legitimate business, that's all because of you. Because he wants to be worthy of you. But he's not there yet. I lowered my hands, meeting Constantine's gaze. He's still dealing in death while building displays of my embroidery. Still profiting from violence while reading bedtime stories to orphans. How do I reconcile that? I don't know. That's between you and him. Constantine straightened. But I can tell you this. Lucian Marchetti is the best man I've ever worked for. He's not perfect. He's made terrible choices. But he's also saved hundreds of lives through his support of hospitals and orphanages. He's given people opportunities they'd never have otherwise. He's complicated, Signora. Just like all of us. Before I could respond, Constantine's phone rang. His expression darkened as he answered, listened, then looked at me with something like alarm. What is it? I demanded. Volkov's visit was a distraction. While he was here, his men hit 2 of our warehouses outside Palermo. They're sending a message. What kind of message? That nowhere is safe. That they can strike anywhere, anytime. Constantine's jaw tightened. Mr. Marchetti is returning immediately. He should be here within 2 hours. Those 2 hours felt like an eternity. I waited in the sitting room, unable to concentrate on anything except the sick fear churning in my stomach. Volkov had walked into the villa like he owned it. Had shown me truths about Lucian I wasn't ready to face. Had proven that the security I'd been counting on wasn't as impenetrable as Lucian believed. When Lucian finally burst through the villa doors, he looked like controlled fury. His eyes scanned the room until they found me, and I watched relief, love, and fear war across his features before he crossed to me in 3 long strides, pulling me into his arms. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? No, I'm fine. Constantine was here the entire time. I let myself sink into his embrace, drawing comfort from his solid presence. But Lucian... I know. Constantine briefed me. He pulled back just enough to cut my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. What he showed you, the photograph, it's real. I won't lie about that. But it's also not the whole truth. Then tell me the whole truth. I placed my hands over his. No more secrets. No more protecting me from the reality of your world. Tell me everything. Lucian led me to his office, the room where I'd discovered his shrine to my embroidery. where he'd kept evidence of his hidden heart. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid catching the lamplight as his hand trembled almost imperceptibly. I'd never seen him this shaken, this close to losing the iron control he maintained so carefully. "The weapons shipment Volkov showed you is real," he began, his voice rough. "It's one of the last contracts I inherited from Lorenzo that I haven't been able to terminate without causing major disruptions. The buyers are militia groups in Eastern Europe, some fighting for legitimate causes, some less so. I've been trying to renegotiate, to find ways to exit that market entirely, but it's complicated." Complicated how? I needed to understand, needed to see beyond the simple horror of guns and death. Because if I pull out, someone else fills the vacuum immediately. Someone with fewer scruples about who they sell to, with no interest in screening buyers or limiting quantities. At least through my network, there are controls, limits, attempts to prevent the worst outcomes. He took a long drink, grimacing. It's a rationalization, I know. Blood money is still blood money, regardless of how carefully it's counted. Are you planning to stop? To get out of that business entirely? Yes. No hesitation. I've been working toward that for 2 years, since I first saw you at Sant'Angelo, if I'm honest. Something about watching you create beauty for children who had nothing made me look at my own choices differently. Made me want to build something better than what Lorenzo left me. He moved to the glass display case, his fingers hovering over the replica handkerchief without quite touching. Every time I looked at this, I thought about the woman who'd made it, who'd poured hours into something she'd never be paid for, just because it might bring comfort to a frightened child. And I thought about the man I was, someone who profited from making children frightened in the first place. The cognitive dissonance was destroying me. Then why haven't you stopped? I moved to stand beside him, studying our reflections in the glass. If you've been working toward change for 2 years, why are you still making weapons deals? Because dismantling an empire takes time and strategy. His jaw tightened. I can't just announce I'm going legitimate. That would signal weakness, invite challenges from people like Volkov who'd love to carve up my territory. I have to transition carefully, replacing illegal revenue streams with legal ones, ensuring the people who depend on me for employment aren't left vulnerable. The people who depend on you are also involved in illegal activities, I pointed out. Some, yes, but not all. For every gun shipment, there are 100 legitimate employees in my restaurants, my hotels, my import businesses, families who depend on steady paychecks, who don't know or care about the darker aspects of how I built this empire. I'm responsible for them too. I understood what he was saying, even as part of me recoiled from it. Lucian was trapped between the world he'd inherited and the world he wanted to build, unable to completely abandon one without destroying what he'd created in the other. How long? I asked quietly. How long until you can walk away completely? Honestly, 2 years, maybe 3. I have major contracts that need to expire or be transferred, alliances that need to be restructured, legitimate businesses that need to grow large enough to sustain everything else. He finally looked at me, vulnerability naked in his eyes. I know that's not the answer you want. I know you're wondering if you can live with a man who profits from violence for another 2 or 3 years. And I'll understand if... Stop. I pressed my fingers to his lips, silencing him. I'm not going anywhere, Lucian. I'm angry, yes. I'm struggling to reconcile the man who treasures embroidery with the man who sells weapons. But I also understand that change takes time, that you can't undo decades of your uncle's choices overnight. Relief flooded his features, but I wasn't finished. However, I need something from you. Complete transparency going forward. No more protecting me from uncomfortable truths. If you're involved in something morally questionable, I need to know. I can't support what I don't understand, and I can't make informed choices about our marriage if you're hiding things. You'll hate me, he said quietly, When you know everything, see everything, you'll realize I'm not the man you want me to be. Then give me the chance to decide that for myself. I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. You've been making decisions for me since the moment you claimed me as payment for my father's debt. Let me make this one. Let me choose you, knowing exactly who you are, instead of discovering it piece by piece through men like Volkov. Something shifted in his expression, hope breaking through the habitual self-loathing. You'd still choose me? Knowing what I am, what I've done? I'm choosing who you're trying to become, I corrected. The man who supports orphanages and phases out weapons deals. The man who keeps embroidered handkerchiefs over his heart and reads to traumatized children. That man is worth choosing. But he has to let me see him, has to trust me with the complete truth. Even if that truth is ugly? Especially if it's ugly. Beautiful things are easy to love, Lucian. It's the broken, complicated, struggling things that require real commitment. He pulled me into his arms then, holding me like I was something precious and fragile he was terrified of losing. I felt the tremor running through his body, the careful control finally cracking under the weight of everything we'd been building toward. I don't deserve you, he whispered against my hair. Probably not, I agreed. But you're trying to. That counts for something. We stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other while the villa settled into nighttime quiet around us. Eventually, Lucian pulled back enough to meet my eyes. Volkov will escalate. What happened today? Showing you that photograph, hitting our warehouses. It's just the beginning. He's going to keep pushing, keep trying to drive wedges between us, keep proving he can breach our security whenever he wants. Then what do? We remove the threat permanently. His voice was cold, controlled, the voice of the man who'd built an empire on calculated violence. I've been trying to avoid direct confrontation, hoping Volkov would accept that my territory is off limits. But subtlety isn't working. He needs a demonstration of strength, something definitive that makes him understand the cost of targeting what's mine. Ice trickled down my spine. What kind of demonstration? The kind where he stops being a problem. Lucian's expression was hard, implacable. I won't let him threaten you, Valentina. I can't. Even if it means doing things that make you see me as a monster. Lucian, I need you to go somewhere safe while I handle this. Sant'Angelo, maybe, or a property I own in Malta. Somewhere with security so tight that even Volkov couldn't. No. I pulled away from him, crossing my arms. I'm not running. I'm not hiding while you do whatever violent thing you're planning. If we're building something real, if you're letting me see the complete truth, then I stay. I face this with you. It's not safe. Nothing about loving you is safe. I moved back to him, taking his face in my hands. But I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you, this life, whatever comes with it. But you don't get to make me disappear whenever things get dangerous. That's not how marriage works. You don't understand what I'll have to do. Then help me understand. I held his gaze, refusing to flinch. What exactly are you planning? He was silent for a long moment, warring with himself. Finally he sighed, the fight draining out of him. Volkov operates from a villa outside Catania. He keeps his core operations there. Records, contacts, money. Constantine has been gathering intelligence for weeks. We know his security patterns, his vulnerabilities, when he's most exposed. And, I prompted when he hesitated, and tomorrow night, we're going to remove him, permanently. The words were clinical, detached. It will send a message to anyone else who might think about challenging my territory, that there are lines that don't get crossed, that threatening my family has consequences. Family. He'd said it so naturally, as if I'd always been part of that definition, as if our strange, arranged marriage had transformed into something worth killing for. Will you do it yourself? I had to ask. Or will Constantine— I'll be there, Lucian cut in, leading the operation. I don't ask my men to do anything I'm not willing to do myself. But yes, Constantine and a team will be with me. This isn't a solo venture. And if something goes wrong? If Volkov is more prepared than you think? His hand came up to cup my cheek, thumb brushing my skin with devastating gentleness. Then I'll do everything in my power to come back to you. But Valentina, you need to understand. There's a chance I won't. Volkov is dangerous, and even the best plans can fail. If that happens, Constantine has instructions to get you somewhere safe, to give you resources to build a new life far from all of this. Stop talking like you're already dead. Anger flared, hot and protective. You're coming back. You have to come back because I refuse to lose you now that I've finally decided to keep you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Decided to keep me? Yes. You difficult, complicated, infuriating man. I'm keeping you. I pulled him down until our foreheads touched. So you survive tomorrow night, and you come home, and we continue building this ridiculous marriage that started with extortion and somehow turned into something real. Valentina. Promise me. My voice broke slightly. Promise you'll come back. I promise I'll try. It was the most honest answer he could give, and we both knew it. And if I do come back, if we survive this, then no more secrets. Complete transparency. You'll know everything about my business, my plans, my past. All of it. Deal. I kissed him then, pouring everything I couldn't say into the contact. Fear and hope and love I was still learning to name. He responded with an intensity that stole my breath, his arms tightening around me like he could shield me from the dangerous world by sheer force of will. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I should let you rest. Tomorrow will be— Stay. The word emerged before I could overthink it. Tonight, stay with me. Not in separate rooms, not maintaining careful distance. Just stay. Something raw and vulnerable crossed his face. Are you sure? I'm sure. I took his hand, leading him from the office toward my rooms. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want tonight. I want to fall asleep in your arms and wake up the same way. I want one night where we're just Lucian and Valentina, husband and wife, without the weight of everything else. In my bedroom, we shed the careful facades we'd maintained for so long. Lucian helped me out of my dress with hands that trembled slightly, his touch reverent, almost worshipful. I unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the body I'd only glimpsed before. Lean muscle and old scars, evidence of a life lived violently. Are you sure? He asked again, when we stood in only undergarments, vulnerability naked in his eyes. Once we cross this line, there's no going back to careful distance. I don't want distance. I pulled him toward the bed, heart hammering. I want you. All of you. Even the parts that frighten me. What followed was tender and intense, fumbling and perfect. Two people learning each other's bodies and hearts simultaneously. Lucian was careful, attentive, constantly checking that I was comfortable, that I wanted this. I'd expected the controlled man I'd come to know, but instead found someone almost overwhelmed by emotion, by the intimacy of finally being allowed close. Afterward, we lay tangled together in the darkness, his hand tracing lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, my head pillowed on his chest, where I could hear his heartbeat gradually slowing. I love you, he murmured into the quiet. I know I've said it before, but I need you to hear it now. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever you learn about me in the future, that truth doesn't change. I love you, Valentina, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. I love you too. The words came easier than I'd expected, truth settling into my bones. I don't know when it happened. Maybe during one of our breakfasts, or when I found your display case, or just now. But it's real. You're real to me, Lucian. Not the reputation or the empire, just you. His arms tightened around me, as if he could keep me safe through proximity alone. Promise me something. Anything. If tomorrow goes wrong, if I don't come back, don't mourn too long. Build the life you deserve, the one you would have had if your father hadn't gambled it away. Find happiness, even if it's without me. Stop. I lifted my head to look at him in the darkness. You're coming back. I won't accept any other outcome. He smiled, sad and tender. Your faith in me is humbling. My faith in us, I corrected. We've come too far, survived too much to end like this. So you go tomorrow, you do whatever needs to be done, and then you come home to me. Understand? Yes, ma'am. His tone was lighter, teasing. When did you get so bossy? When I married a mafia boss who needed someone to keep him in line. I settled back against his chest, exhaustion finally pulling at me. Now sleep. Tomorrow can wait. I felt him press a kiss to the top of my head, heard him whisper something too quiet to make out. Then sleep claimed us both. Two people who'd been forced together now choosing to stay, gambling everything on love that had emerged from the most unlikely circumstances. The next day passed in agonizing slowness. Lucian spent most of it in meetings with Constantine and his security team, planning and preparing. I tried to work on embroidery but couldn't concentrate, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. What if Volkov was expecting them? What if the intelligence Constantine had gathered was wrong? What if Lucian didn't come home? As evening approached, Lucian found me in the garden where I'd been pacing despite Constantine's protests about staying inside. He looked like he was heading to war, dressed in black tactical gear, weapons visible beneath his jacket, his expression set and determined. I'm leaving soon, he said, pulling me into his arms. Constantine will stay here with you. Half the team remains to secure the villa. You'll be safe. I don't care about safe. My fingers clutched his jacket. I care about you coming back. I will. He tilted my chin up, his kiss soft and lingering. I have too much to come back to, too much worth fighting for. Lucian, no goodbyes. He pressed another kiss to my forehead. Goodbyes are for endings. This is just, see you soon. I watched from the terrace as he left, his team moving with military precision toward the waiting vehicles. Constantine stood beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. He'll make it back, Signora. Mr. Marchetti is the best strategist I know. He doesn't take unnecessary risks. But this whole thing is an unnecessary risk, I argued. There has to be another way to handle Volkov without direct confrontation. Not anymore. Volkov made this personal when he threatened you. In our world, that can't stand. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. Constantine and I waited in the sitting room, neither of us able to pretend normalcy. Around midnight, his phone buzzed with a text message. His expression gave nothing away as he read it, but I saw tension leave his shoulders. They've completed the primary objective. No casualties on our side. They're en route back now. Relief crashed through me so intensely I nearly collapsed. Lucian's all right? Minor injuries, but functional. He insisted on checking on you before seeking medical attention. Constantine's mouth quirked in something like amusement. Stubborn man. 20 minutes later, I heard vehicles approaching. I ran to the foyer despite Constantine's protests about protocol, needing to see with my own eyes that Lucian had survived. When he walked through the door, bloodied, exhausted, but alive and whole, something inside me broke and reformed simultaneously. You came back. I crossed to him, careful of obvious injuries but needing to touch him, to confirm his reality. I promised I'd try. His smile was tired but genuine. Turns out I'm very motivated to keep promises made to my wife. You're hurt. I noticed the makeshift bandage on his arm, the way he was favoring his left side. Nothing serious. Volkov put up more fight than expected, but he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The outcome was clear from his presence here. Over the next few hours, as a doctor examined Lucian's injuries and patched him up, Konstantin briefed me on what had happened. Volkov was gone. His core operations dismantled, his network scattered. The threat had been neutralized, though at a cost I tried not to dwell on too closely. "It's over," Lucian said later when we were alone in his room. "Our room now," we'd silently agreed. "Volkov won't threaten you again. No one will. And the others, his associates? We'll think very carefully before challenging my territory." His voice was flat, exhausted. "This is what I am, Valentina. This is what my world requires. Violence answered with violence. Threats eliminated with precision. If you can't live with that—" "I can live with it," I interrupted. "Not happily, not without moral struggle. But I can live with it, because I understand the alternative. You either control the violence or it controls you. You've chosen the former, and while I wish there was another way, I accept that this is the reality we're in. For now," he added. "But I meant what I said about transitioning away from all of this, about building something better." "I know." I settled beside him on the bed, careful of his injuries. "And I'll be here while you do it. Supporting you, challenging you, keeping you accountable. That's what partners do." He pulled me close, his body relaxing for the first time since he'd returned. Partners. I like that. 18 months later, the villa had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. Lucian had kept his promise about transparency. I now sat in on some of his business meetings, understood the intricacies of his operations, knew exactly which ventures were legitimate and which still existed in moral gray areas. The weapons contracts had been terminated, that revenue stream replaced by expanded real estate and hospitality holdings. It wasn't perfect. There were still aspects of his business I wished didn't exist. But progress was measurable, real. Sant'Angelo had flourished with increased support. Isabella now overseeing not just the orphanage, but also educational programs and job training for older children. Lucian visited less frequently than before. But when he did, I came with him. The children knew us as a couple now, witnessed the strange marriage that had started with force and evolved into genuine partnership. My embroidery business had grown beyond what I'd imagined. With Teresa's help managing logistics and Lucian's contacts providing connections to high-end clients, I was creating pieces for people across Europe. The income was substantial. Enough that I'd started my own charitable fund to match Lucian's donations to Sant'Angelo and other causes. But the biggest change was simpler, more intimate. Lucian and I had learned to build a life together. Not the careful, distant coexistence of our first months, but real partnership. We argued sometimes about his business decisions, about the pace of change, about how much risk was acceptable. But we also laughed, supported each other, built something neither of us had expected when we'd stood in that chapel exchanging reluctant vows. On our 2-year anniversary, Lucian surprised me with a ceremony, not a wedding. We were already married, but a renewal of vows. This time at Sant'Angelo, with Isabella and the children as witnesses, with no force or obligation, just choice. 2 years ago, I claimed you as payment for a debt, Lucian said, his voice steady but emotional. It was selfish, manipulative, and wrong, but it was also the best decision I ever made, even if I made it for terrible reasons. Today, I'm asking you to choose me again, not because you're obligated, not because you're trapped, but because you want to. Will you, Valentina? Will you choose to stay married to this complicated, damaged man who loves you more than anything else in his life? I looked at him, this man who'd forced his way into my life and somehow become my home, who kept my embroidery in a glass case like treasure, who read to traumatize children and fought to build something better than what he'd inherited, who made me furious and proud in equal measure, who'd learned to tear down walls and let me see the heart underneath. Yes, I said simply. I choose you, Lucian Marchetti. Every complicated, infuriating, beautiful part of you, now and always. We exchanged new rings that day, simple bands I'd embroidered with our initials, sealed under glass so they'd last forever. And as we stood in the chapel where Lucian had once been a frightened boy, surrounded by children who represented everything good he was fighting to create, I realized something profound. Love doesn't always arrive the way we expect. Sometimes it's forced on us, thrust into our lives through circumstances we didn't choose. But that doesn't make it less real when it finally takes root. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most unlikely beginnings, like hope embroidered into handkerchiefs, or marriages that start with debt and become devotion. Our story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messier than that, more complicated, built on foundations that would never be entirely clean. But it was ours, chosen despite everything, maintained through conscious effort, growing stronger every day we decided to stay. And in the end, maybe that was worth more than any easy love story. Because we'd fought for this. We'd earned every moment of peace, every laugh shared, every morning waking up together. We'd transformed a transaction into a marriage, obligation into partnership, force into choice. That night, as we stood on the terrace of the villa watching stars emerge above Sicily, Lucian's arms around me and my hand resting over his heart where I knew my handkerchief still lived in his pocket, I felt completely certain of our future. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be more challenges, more ethical struggles, more moments where we'd have to choose each other over easier paths, but we would face them together. Two people who'd been forced together by fate and chose to stay because of love. "What are you thinking?" Lucian murmured against my hair. "That I'm glad my father gambled badly." The admission would have seemed insane 2 years ago, but now it was just truth. If he hadn't, we never would have found each other. I would have found you eventually. His arms tightened. I was already looking for ways to approach you, to introduce myself without terrifying you. Your father's debt just accelerated the timeline. Still sounds creepy when you phrase it that way. I know. I felt his smile against my temple. But it's our story. Strange beginning and all. Strange beginning, I agreed. But good middle. And hopefully a long, complicated, beautiful future. I'll spend that future earning your trust, he promised. Earning the choice you make every day to stay with me. You already earned it. I turned in his arms to face him. But I like that you're still trying. Shows you haven't gotten complacent. Never with you, amore. He used the endearment that had evolved between us, more meaningful than any grand declaration. With you, I'll spend every day grateful and trying to be worthy. As we stood there wrapped in each other under the Sicilian stars, the villa settled into nighttime quiet around us. Somewhere inside, Teresa was probably tidying up. Constantine was reviewing security protocols. The household continued its rhythms. Normal life built around our abnormal beginning. And in my workshop, new projects waited. Pieces I was creating not out of obligation or survival, but out of joy. Because that's what love had given me. The freedom to create beauty not as escape or therapy, but as celebration. Every stitch a reminder that even the darkest patterns could be transformed into something worth treasuring. Just like our marriage. Just like us.